Zen and the Art of Remaining Awake. Part 1, the 29th of December, 2020. The sun, at once a blistering ball of fire and an atom of light in a universe of shadows, is so colossal that it could swallow more than 1,000,000 planets the size of Earth and still remain hungry. Though Zen Buddhism stresses the value and virtues of being fully present in the present moment, as I trudge up the lane, it's not the crunch of ice beneath my feet or the plight of famished birds that preoccupies me. It's the prospect of a hot drink and 4 walls behind which to shelter. Low on the horizon the sun is guttering like a dying candle. Once inside, I kick off my boots and stoke up the fire before approaching the windows to draw the curtains. Frost has been about his ministry, etching his floral fingerprints across the ice-cold glass. It's so damn cold I'm wearing both a hat and scarf as I sink into a chair, heave a rug across my lap, then reach for a volume of The Golden Bough, Sir James Fraser's heroic attempt to unearth and expose the roots of religion. The Scotsman left few stones unturned. He dug deep, disinterring primitive taboos, bizarre sexual rituals, and perturbing shamanic initiations. His ambition knew no bounds. He excavated myriad cultures through countless centuries. So comprehensive was his inquiry, first published in 1890, that to this day The Golden Bough, a study in magic and religion, remains an anthropologist's Bible. And it is while scanning its pages that I chance upon these lines. In a pass of the Peruvian Andes stand 2 ruined towers on opposite hills. Iron hooks are clamped into their walls for the purpose of stretching a net from one tower to the other. The net was intended to catch the sun. My aim is no less ambitious: to weave a web of words that will liberate rather than enmesh your heart, before igniting your imagination. A reliable and trustworthy source of heat and of light would be invaluable now, at this cruelest time of the year. How the sun loves to sleep! He rose just 8 hours ago and yet has already retired for another 16-hour doze. But before I too sink to rest, I resolve to make best use of what remains of the day. Old age, according to Dylan Thomas, should burn and rave at close of day. On the other hand, 500 years before the angel Gabriel visited the Virgin Mary, the Buddha pointed out that the quieter you become, the more you can hear. I will take the Buddha's advice. I will quieten my mind so that I can hear and, having heard, awaken. It's time to set The Golden Bough aside. I scan my bookcase, and there, snug between larger volumes, I spy a battered copy of the Faber Book of Modern Verse, an edition printed in January 1939, 8 short months before Hitler unleashed the wolves of war. This book knows what to do, which is to fall open. At page 114, T.S. Eliot's wasteland is over, and his journey of the Magi is about to begin. And here, nestling between these celebrated poems, I find the poet's signature. At first, that's all I see, the poet's name. Then I note that royal blue ink flowed from his pen, that both his T's are slightly smudged, and that his pen whisked down when dotting that modest I. However, when examined through the lens of what William Blake called the divine imagination, Eliot's letters assume a life of their own. He cut his initial T with 2 deft strokes that failed to meet, allowing the curved trunk to assume the form of a monk in a Japanese ink drawing, a pilgrim sheltering beneath a bowed bamboo roof. He's leaning away from you. That dot at his feet is a begging bowl. Where Eliot began S for Stearns, ink pooled to form the head of a serpent. Look closely. You can make out its eye. That next dot is a bird that has spread its wings and is heading towards that undulating capital E that resembles a sketch map of Africa. The bird is making for the Cape of Good Hope. Below his name, Eliot added his location, Uppsala, and below that, the date, an almost palindromic marker in space-time, 24 IV 42. He must have thought this important, for he underlined this information with a decisive 2-inch dash. Note how thin the ink runs in places, that first 4, for example, and where Roman numerals denote April. Read on, and you'll learn why. This signature was a gift from my father, who acquired it on the day that the Luftwaffe began raining bombs on Exeter, the opening salvo of a bombardment aimed specifically at historic English towns. This was Hitler's retaliation for the RAF's recent raid on the ancient city of Lübeck. In among the cities of the dead, the history and moral legacy of the World War II bombing of civilians in Germany and Japan, Professor A C Grayling highlights that the specific purpose of the raid was to undermine the morale of the enemy civilian population. Lübeck was selected precisely because its ancient timbered buildings enabled the RAF to experiment with new firebombing techniques perfected by the Americans 3 years later, when their attack on Tokyo on the 10th of March 1945 left 100,000 civilians dead. Back in 1942, on the 28th of March, under a clear moonlit sky and with especially good visibility due to a severe frost, 234 Wellington and Sterling bombers dropped 400 tons of bombs and 25,000 incendiary devices on the Baltic medieval masterpiece, Lübeck. Its 13th century town hall lay in ruins, as did its church of St. Mary, built between 1265 and 1351, and which had once boasted the highest brick vault in the world. Hitler was livid, long alert to the soul-stirring properties of fine architecture. His views accorded with Goethe's. Music is liquid architecture, and architecture is frozen music. The Führer made up his mind. The RAF's vandalism could not be tolerated. So he reached for his Baedeker travel guidebook and ordered reprisals against every historic English city it contained. For my father, 29 years old and safe in neutral Sweden, this particular April, far from being cruel, was the kindest he had known. He was in love, and mightily relieved to have left London behind. He had escaped its smouldering ruins, the pervasive stench of burnt timber, sandbag shops, rationing, blackouts, and the constant fear of death. Residing 40 miles north of Stockholm, he was lecturing in English literature and philosophy at Uppsala University, and had seized an opportunity to host Eliot for a week. The poet was touring Sweden on behalf of the British Council. It was at the railway station as they parted that my father handed his guest this battered book. The signing ceremony took longer than anticipated, as a bitter Scandinavian winter had frozen the ink in his pen. Cedric, my father, was happier than he had ever been, not only because he was in love and the poet had persevered, but because 4 months earlier Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor had finally convinced Congress that defeating Nazi Germany required the exploitation of all America's extensive resources. Hitler, my father now knew, would lose the war. True, he appreciated the autograph, for though yet to win his Nobel Prize, Eliot was already to verse what Joyce was to fiction, Picasso to painting, and Stravinsky to music. But my father's delight was not born of the brain. The joy irradiating his chest was not ego, but eros. 2 weeks earlier, as he was introduced to a beautiful Hungarian refugee, Cupid had strung his bow and fired 2 arrows. Cedric was smitten. Mrs. Eva Langlet was the one. True, she was already married and to the son of an ambassador, but what did that matter? He understood that there are no rules in love, especially once it became clear that that second arrow had also struck its mark, and that his love was reciprocated. Eliot begins The Wasteland with a celebrated line, "April is the cruelest month." He would not have expressed that opinion today, not at the fag end of 2020, 4 days after a cancelled Christmas. Back in April, during the first lockdown, as COVID-19's initial wave peaked, a tsunami that in Great Britain alone washed up 57,000 corpses. We imagined things could get no worse, but they have. Now, with a second tsunami gathering momentum, December claims that unenviable title, the cruelest month. Grief, fear and anger are useless unless channeled to a worthwhile end, such as writing a journal worthy of these dark days. Born in 1953, I am now transiting through Shakespeare's 6th age of man. The world's greatest poet, who died aged just 52, was merciless in his prognosis. The 7th age depicts an increasingly isolated individual, whose every faculty remorselessly diminishes until he or she is heard no more, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. In the Zen Buddhist tradition, Satori refers to a deep experience of kensho, or seeing one's true nature. Increasingly, when gazing at a mirror, I recognize my ephemeral nature. And now, glancing up from my book, I am again reminded of the transient nature of life. From a photograph, my youngest son, Oliver, is smiling at me. He's just 10 years old and cradling a jet black cat. But now that cat is dead, and Oliver's a father, and far away, busy watching people die. Now he's a doctor in Sacramento, and responsible for patients gasping for air like so many fish, stranded out of water. He too is dismayed and angry. Yesterday he zoomed from California to inform me that the Kent variant has just been detected in the Golden State and is on course to sweep the world. Political ineptitude has had catastrophic consequences for so many countries: Brazil, Hungary, Iran, Italy, Mexico and Russia, to name another 6. And as the curtains are drawn on the tragedy, Paul Simon's words resonate around the world. I don't know a soul who's not been battered. I don't have a friend who feels at ease. I don't know a dream that's not been shattered or driven to its knees. While on a dream holiday in his uncle's villa in 79 AD, 17-year-old Pliny the Younger watched Vesuvius erupt before entombing Pompeii. Afterwards his conscience pricked him. Surely, as Fortuna had enabled him to watch the disaster from a safe vantage point, he was obligated to record all that he had witnessed. I too, from a safe vantage point, have witnessed the catastrophe unfold. I recall those earliest reports from China of a deadly new virus. The first case was reported just over a year ago in Wuhan on the 8th of December 2019. 2 days later, 3 people had been hospitalized. On Christmas Eve, doctors at Wuhan General Hospital extracted fluid from the lungs of patients with what they thought was unresolving pneumonia, then sent these samples to be genetically sequenced. By the 23rd of January 2020, the Chinese authorities had sealed a city the size of London. The normally thronging South China seafood wholesale market was silent. No shouting, swearing, haggling or laughing, no gossiping, and certainly no embracing. Wuhan had died. Birdsong could be heard in the city's silent heart. I was in Atlanta, Georgia in mid-February 2020, visiting my eldest brother, who was worried I might have difficulty getting back into the UK. After all, a full week had passed since, on the 7th of February, the Taiwanese authorities had imposed a 14-day quarantine on all foreign nationals, as well as on any of their citizens who had transited through mainland China, Hong Kong or Macau. "This is the big one," my brother warned. "Britain will be pulling up its drawbridge." How wrong he was. Between January and March, the UK welcomed 190,000 people from Wuhan and other high-risk Chinese cities. I bade my brother farewell outside Atlanta's international airport and joined queues of wary travellers who eyed one another over face masks or through misty glasses. Yet Wuhan was half a planet away. How in God's name had we all become extras in a disaster movie? On the plane I began reading Camus' Plague and was soon wondering if the French philosopher had plagiarized Nostradamus. "The day will come," I read, "when, for the instruction or misfortune of humankind, the plague will rouse its rats and send them to die in some well-contented city." Rats aren't vectors of COVID-19, yet human-sized rats have indeed been roused by this plague, and some, undoubtedly, have made a killing. Pearl Harbor was crucially important because it foretold of a united commitment to fight humankind's common enemy, National Socialism. Today, however, humankind's common enemy, COVID-19, is dividing rather than uniting nations. In 1942, when Eliot signed my father's book, the talk was of solidarity and of pooling resources. Churchill implored everyone to acknowledge the best and indeed only way to confront a common enemy. "Let us go forward together." But today solidarity is sneered at. Today it's every nation for itself. The wealthiest governments hoard vast stocks of vaccines, and vaccination nationalism is a brand new flag which every populist politician is happy to salute. It may seem a ridiculous idea, Camus wrote, but the only way to fight the plague is with common decency. Regretfully, common decency is not a characteristic notable among those wielding the levers of power. The pandemic has already claimed over 4 million lives. It eclipses the usual iniquities such as starvation in Yemen and South Sudan, and the suppression of human rights in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Russia, Belarus, China, Myanmar. Take your pick. To cap it all, obscuring even the existential threat of climate catastrophe, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are kicking up a storm cloud of alternative facts to bewilder and blind us. Here in the UK all year long, to ensure blindfolds stay tight, a conveyor belt of politicians have appeared on our TVs, assuring us that they are working around the clock, day and night, in an ever-changing environment, and learning by moving heaven and earth how to implement world-beating measures that are keeping us one step ahead of the virus, thereby ensuring that Britain's pride and joy, our National Health Service, doesn't get overwhelmed. George Orwell foresaw such an invasion, not of Nazis, but of ready-made phrases. And in Politics and the English Language, he explained why politicians use them. Every such phrase anaesthetizes a portion of one's brain. In Britain, a 3-word formula, unpredictable, unprecedented, and world-beating, parroted by the party faithful, has rendered the nation comatose. Poetry is at war with ready-made phrases, and its purpose is the reverse, to awaken rather than anaesthetize one's brain. In Why Poetry Matters, J. Pirani argues that poetry extends the boundaries of thought by extending the boundaries of expression itself. T.S. Eliot sought to extend the boundaries of thought and expression by employing a 3-word formula to conclude The Wasteland. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Shanti, a Sanskrit word that translates as the peace that passes all understanding, is frequently used at the end of Hindu and Buddhist prayers. And it was this profound peace that Eliot sought to evoke at the conclusion of his epic poem. But I don't feel peaceful tonight. I feel agitated and wonder if perhaps the Welsh nightingale wasn't right after all. Perhaps it's best to burn and rave at close of day. So I scan my bookcase for more contemporary verse and locate A Fire in My Head, Sir Ben Okri's most recent anthology. This Nigerian-born British poet and novelist doesn't shy from controversial topics. The death by fire and neglect of 72 residents in London's Grenfell Tower, and the murder of George Floyd by a white policeman in broad daylight. Halfway through Shaved Head poem, Okri's current response to the pandemic, I recall an advantage poets enjoy over prose writers. Permitted to format his lines as he wishes, Okri pays them out like a master mariner, one knot at a time, enabling his readers' souls to resonate with the full solemnity of his entreaty when his words finally settle on the ocean's floor. We're at such a turning point in human history. It was always coming for us. Disaster was always coming for us. We're overdrawn on the bank of our futures. It's time to ask questions that go all the way down to the depths of the meaning of human life, the life of the species, the life of the earth.